It is Virginia Moss, and she is here to talk with us about the criticality of citizen data scientists. Help me welcome her up.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to quick share my screen before I start talking, so that I don't do exactly as I'm doing and ramble on. Oops.
Is it letting you take control?
No. See?
Oh, no.
Hold on. Sorry, everyone. I'm already off to a good start. There we go. I found it. Can you confirm? Oops.
Confirmed.
Are you seeing
I'm seeing Windows 10 in a window.
Bear with me. Okay, everyone. I'm not a Teams user. How do I exit out of this?
You're running this on a Mac. I'm not a Mac user. Doing.
Uh-oh. Tony said to do something stupid at the start, and here it is. This is me trying to exit out of Teams.
Don't exit. You're going to leave the meeting.
There we go. So let me try this one more time.
The problem is the Mac.
I know. Don't make. And this is being recorded, so this will be great for Tony to replay. This will be great for Tony to replay for the rest of the team. Okay. It did it again. It just kicked off my. What do you see right now?
It's coming through yet. It wants to share something, but all I'm seeing is a blank.
All right. Third time's the charm, everyone.
Yep.
Can you see someone do a drum roll? Can you see a Chrome screen?
Yes, citizen data scientist.
Okay, it did not like when I hit present in this. So I'm going to do it now and hit present. Now it's
full screen.
You can see full screen citizen data scientist?
Correct.
Okay, well, it's only going to go up from here.
Yes.
Everybody. So thank you for having me tonight. Sorry for the slow start. I couldn't be more excited to talk about this topic. Citizen data scientist is not only something that I live, but something that I live to talk about and try to help other people in this role. I'm always trying to recruit more citizen data scientists. So I think they are the secret weapon in data science. And so we're going to talk about finding and developing them. Did the screen switch? Just confirm that for me. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm not going to read this, but a little bit background on me. I do have my academic training in econometrics. That's my favorite, Professor Haley, favorite class ever, and also statistics. And I have the pleasure of going into lots of organizations and digging into their data. And that's the favorite part of my job. I can get lost for hours in a new set of data. But where I think the most value is not only exploring and learning those insights using my data curiosity, but turning them into actions and things to be done with the insights that we're learning, and helping to grow businesses and make a difference in people's lives. I don't want to talk to myself all night, so I am going to encourage chatter in the chat, unmuting, lots of conversation. I'm a people person, so we'll do this together.
Good job so far.
Thank you. So a little background. What's the problem with data science? There is a problem. According to QuantHub, there's a shortage of about 250,000 data science professionals in 2020 already. I'm sure that you've heard that data scientists aren't everywhere. You don't run into them. You know, they're not always down the block. Now, we are in Neenah, Wisconsin, so there are some down the block. But that's a problem. The average starting salary is 150,000. There's a lot of differences in what skill sets they have. And so when you're starting a data analytics practice, you can't always just hire a data scientist and assume that that will get you rolling. Also, when you're looking for a data scientist, we've learned that they don't necessarily like doing a lot of the prep work. So there's a process that goes along with data science. And a lot of it is data preparation. Personally, slicing and dicing data is awesome. I would rather do that than make dinner. But a data scientist, 78% of them say that's the least enjoyable part of their work. And they spend 80% of their time preparing and managing data for analysis. So even if you have a data scientist, you're not necessarily being able to use them to the most of their ability. So they want to use fun algorithms and make big changes. And there they are cleaning up data, which I'd happily do for them. So I'd like to introduce then the citizen data scientist. So this job function is going to grow, they say, 5 times that of a traditional data scientist in the next 2 years. And before I go on and on about them, I'm going to define what a citizen data scientist is. So this is a business person who aspires to use data science techniques, such as machine learning, to discover new insights and create predictive models, improve business outcomes. So they want to do some of the same things as a data scientist. There's lots of aspirations, but maybe they don't have the same background. How do you find them? Well, surprise, you might already have some citizens data scientists. And listening to a lot of the people that were talking, some of you may be citizen data scientists. So you can add that new title to your resume. They're hidden around the organization a lot of times. When I go into a new company, I'll find them being called business analysts, data analysts, system analysts, business consultants, reporting analysts. And really, you can start to notice who they are because they've got knowledge about the business and some skills that it might be a little more above, just Excel. They might have SQL skills. They might know some statistics language. They might be able to make pretty graphs, and people might go to them for those things. So if you start to look around, there's usually a Cheryl in a cube somewhere that leadership is always asking for the latest Excel or always updating. They probably are managing sometimes Excels that shouldn't be managed anymore. We've all run into that. We've all run into someone who's got the only SQL, and when they're on vacation, no one else knows how to run it. Yes, Brian says Excel huggers. Someone's broke the Excel. Someone doesn't know how those formulas work anymore. Oh, yep, an Access database. Some of the traits that you'll find from these citizen data scientists, I love this one because they usually have a pretty good contextual view of the organization. They may have been there for a while. They may have used analytic techniques to solve business problems in the past. They might have been on some special projects that needed someone with a numbers mindset, I guess. They have an appetite for what matters relative to the business priorities. They've been around the block. They have some business connections. They may have tried a few things. They may have failed a few things. They probably have connections around the business. They've got unique perspectives on each business area. They want to go to bat to justify the business value a lot of times. And they're involved hands-on on multiple analytic areas or activities a lot of times. So their names on a few things. So one of the things that we talk about is reskilling and upskilling these employees to make them better prepared and confident in data roles. And so by upskilling these people that you already have, you don't need to go out recruiting them. You don't need to teach them all about the business. They already know it. They know it better than most people. They even know the dirty underbelly of some of the business, and they've seen the back of the napkin formulas multiple times. So there's a couple ways that you can help them reskill and make sure that they're being more efficient. There's some certification programs, learning new coding language and new tools. I have to point out that if you can help them with better tools, they won't be spending so much time updating those Excels, and then they might be able to use that to do even more advanced stuff. So some of the things that we've done and helped others do in order to gain some extra skills and some tools, things like the Power BI. I personally have the data analyst certification through Microsoft. We use a tool called Dataiku. They have lots of training, and that includes both use of the tool, but also auto ML features and things like that. I've had great professors, have to give shout out again, Professor Haley. Yeah. So studying statistics, there's some really great online programs, even Oshkosh. I've got my master's focusing in economics, applied economics or econometrics. I'd like to pause here. Does anyone have any other ways that you've seen to upskill employees in this way? Any certifications you've completed that you find useful?
Feel free to type in the chat, or if you can unmute, see if anybody has.
Are we doing hand raising?
Oh, we got Ryan's hand raising. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. You said you want it conversational, so I'm happy to oblige. I think you've made an outstanding presentation thus far about this gap that exists in analytics skill space, especially now when demand for analytics skills is going through the roof. Data science scientists are expensive and typically are hard to train. I mean, it takes a lot of years to be, PhD level, whatever. I suffered through that myself, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But getting more of these intermediate level folks, I think, is where we're going to find the value added in many businesses, and doing that in a guided way, which is what you're suggesting. So skills to complement business knowledge, and ideally, so you don't step in bear traps. I mean, data science is really easy to do badly. So the case for doing this in an organized way is, I think, really important. I yield my time.
Any other thoughts? Feel free to type them in, or if you don't want to unmute.
Or if anyone has any certifications that they've done that they thought were really valuable about data science, statistics, any of those, machine learning, any of those areas.
Well, I can talk again.
Go ahead.
What we do with our students is we actually have them work through some of the LinkedIn options, and then they can get little certs on their LinkedIn pages. And that helps them kind of build a resume right from the get-go. We're incorporating R and Python in our undergraduate programs now. Most econ majors now are graduating with 30 weeks of R and 15 weeks of Python and Power BI exposure before they leave undergraduate training. And this is recent. So this is some of the things we're going on my side. I realize I'm unusual because I'm one of the educators in the group here, but those are places we're finding sources. Obviously, Coursera, edX, Udemy, and those other places that you can do various skill upskilling on your own time are obviously out there as well. One place I won't recommend is YouTube. I've spent a lot of time when we developed our curriculum looking at some of the online options, YouTube in particular. I've only found 2 channels that are mostly correct. A lot of that stuff, I think, unless you know what you're doing already, you can't necessarily tell if you're being hoodwinked. So places to watch out for and places to look, I guess, would be sort of that short list. Again, I'll yield my time. I talk too much.
Nicole mentioned Coursera in the chat.
Tim has his hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I am going to be in my first Power BI workshop next week at work. I think we're doing it twice a year, and it's sponsored by our global procurement group. They have an open invitation to anybody who wants to learn Power BI. I think it's mostly for the procurement group, but they'll let others in and they'll work with their own data. And I like that approach because it's hands-on and it's more business-like, and they will get right down to, working with data sets and experimenting with it. So I'm looking forward to it.
I
I
love-
heard of, go ahead.
No, you, Paul, first.
I heard of a great opportunity with associations. There's a Northeast Wisconsin Manufacturing Alliance that has some manufacturing companies in the area, and they have rolled out opportunities for training in Power BI and analysis with partnership with NWTC. And so I help spread the word about that, because I think in my company, which is a manufacturing company, we end up finding those citizen data scientists scattered around, and having the Manufacturing Alliance recognize that and talk with schools about it. That was a great resource.
And I'll just mention someone you know might be one of the presenters for visualizations at that. And Paula, or Tim, actually, I just wanted to make a note. I think it's cool when you get to do training on your own data. That's actually how I learned Python. I took a project that I had done in a different tool and redid it in Python. And so I found way more value. I learned way faster that way. I was just reading Lizette's comment here.
Yeah, she's saying that we found identifying a person with interest in analytics as a good start. Then we train that person. She understands the process. That's how we've been able to develop an equivalent of a data citizen. I've got similar experiences.
Great. Well, I'll keep going. And not only does upskilling I found to be awesome, but citizen data scientists succeed best when they're part of a team. I never want to leave my citizen data scientists on an island. And so what we've found is that teams that look similar to this are really helpful. Whether these other roles are internal or external, it's just nice to have the support. So including project managers, data engineers, so important. I think there's a few of you in the group, so I'll give you props. Product owners, to make sure that you're moving through the right priorities, adding business value. You can get lost in sharing data without actually sharing something useful. And then if the business has the maturity, the budget, or if you're using an outside consultant, it doesn't hurt to have data scientists still. As Ryan Haley said, you don't want bad data science. And so having someone to review your work is really helpful. And Ryan also mentioned that data scientists like to be kept to hang out in the basement with a red Swingline stapler alone. Whereas citizen data scientists, on the other hand, usually like to be on the front lines. So it's a good teamwork when you can have both. Does anyone else have any other roles that you've noticed are really successful in this area on your teams that weren't mentioned?
I would say that for us, some of the most success with building out data availability tooling for others, be it a visualization, be it a Power BI report, being kind of data made that others can also infer and make decisions from. The typical financial cost analyst has been a great example for us. We give them better tooling like Power BI or Tableau or some of these other tools that have come out in the last few years, and they have been able to adapt them and make them into something others can use because they already are familiar with cost analysis or pricing analysis, that kind of thing.
You bring up a good point. I've seen at a few places that out of finance come the very first citizen data scientists.
This kind of reminds me of there's a little bit off topic a little bit, but it does remind me of a primary issue that we've encountered with our graduate students in analytics and through our programs, which is we used to have them try to do projects as part of their curriculum, but it turned out surprisingly large number of companies in the Valley here don't really have much data infrastructure yet. It was quite shocking to us. In fact, some companies pretty good. A lot of companies train wreck. Like they're in the I would call it, maybe they're in like the late Cretaceous era of data infrastructure development. A lot of we call them the Excel huggers, like you were referring to a little earlier, Virginia. That they have and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that's how they had to maintain their data. They didn't have no data lakes, no marts, no cubes, meaningful infrastructure. Even some of the very large companies in the Valley, I know, are grappling with this, and they're trying to move into the data analytics era. And this is a little, it's not exactly the same thing as a citizen data scientist, but it kind of bumps up with some of the challenges that companies are facing in this, urge to move into the analytics era. So that's a huge problem that we've encountered. And I saw a lot of heads nodding just in the few people I can see here. And I think this is something that a group like this, and really those of us involved in these frontiers wanting to expand them, have to be advocates for too. We have to say, look, we can do these things if we have the data, but if we don't have data, we're toast. You know what I mean? And we can't really even get started. So anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but it's certainly something that we've grappled with, and I'm sure anyone working with data has probably grappled. If you happen to work at Google or Amazon, then you probably have like pristine analytics base tables to work with. You can write a simple SQL query and everything's great, but the rest of us, it's not quite so pretty.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing that we found, to be really good at our, kind of our web or digital analysts. They have a lot of times, just collecting data, just kind of being able to understand what's good data, what's bad data, and kind of making a lot of inferences with the data that they have. They seem to be they catch on pretty quickly.
Thanks, Garrison.
All right, so we talked about how they succeed with, lots of learning, with the right team, but also with the right tools. And so when we look at tools, some of the things that we have on our checklist is to make sure that the tools that you're using have great collaboration. They help you define one source of truth. There's good visualizations, because that's the big show. Good security, particularly in certain industries. There should be shared workspace, if possible, auto machine learning tools. Reusability. It's painful for me to watch people redo the same cleaning, cleansing, transforming over and over. We should be able to reuse those data sets. And documentation, not only to share with other people, but to share with your future self. We've all been there where we come back to a project and we can't remember what we were doing. So when we look for tools, these are the things that we're looking for. One of our favorites is Dataiku, but I'd love to throw it back out to everyone else. Is there certain tools that you've really loved in this space?
I really like Alteryx. We use Alteryx quite a bit. It's that and Tableau are probably my two favorite tools outside of using R.
Got some R being mentioned in the chat. Anyone else? Feel free to chat their favorite tool related to collaboration, visualizations, orchestration. SAP Analytics Cloud for an SAP shop. Nice. Domo.
Domo, yep.
Azure Synapse is in use at our place.
And I saw you wrote Power BI. You use that too, right, Paul?
Yes. Any others people want to chat in?
Yeah, here I go again. For me, it's our Power. We do our Power BI, Python, and I'm a MATLAB, and I like Julia a lot in particular. But that's, I'm a little bit more on the nerdy side of things, but if you kind of look around and see what's popular in data science in general, you can actually get some ironic data to answer a data question, right? R and Python thoroughly dominate this space, at least in the data science analytics side. That said, there are tons of specialized specific tools that companies tend to purchase. Remember, R and Python are both open source, so I think you could sometimes run into some warranty type issues or whatever corporate rules for purchasing might happen. MATLAB apparently is probably fairly popular because it's a formal tool that you have to pay for in some companies, especially engineering companies that use it for engineering purposes anyway. So I think the main thing to recognize is, particularly for data science upskilling, is you not only want to teach them how to use the skills that are relevant to your particular job, but you want to teach them the ability to teach themselves, because there's always a new tool coming down the pipe. There's always a new package in R, a new ANN that you can try, or a new, some fancy version of some machine learning thing that's just been developed. And so it's kind of a version of the old saying, teach her to fish. You give her a fish for one day, she can feed herself. Teach her to fish, she can continue to gain that knowledge. It's my 21st century version of that quote. But anyway, so I think that's an important thing to sell. It's not just about skills just for today, but also that ability to continue to advance the accumulation of skills, because this discipline changes so fast. You got to be committed to that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and to that point, it's just fun for me to see that a lot of us are doing a lot of the same work, but using different tools. And it would be cool to see someday, comparisons of how the different tools all come to the same conclusions. And I think it's kind of pretty.
Yeah, I guess I'll say something again. Just a little anecdote. The Federal Reserve System used to use MATLAB to run all their macroeconomic forecasting models out, the Federal Reserve System for the United States. They switched to Julia a few years ago, and their models were running 12 times faster. So sometimes for these large scale problems, which software you're using, is there a lot of overhead? Is it, that can dictate which software you might want to go ahead and route yourself to, depending on the magnitude of your data set. Julia is designed to be fast, and allegedly it's even faster than Python. But anyway, so as for the visualization side, Power BI, Tableau, and all those things are great. A lot of data scientists I have been in contact with tend to do most of their data cleaning in like an R Python type framework, and then just outright a CSV at the end of their script, and then send the cleaned data file over to Power BI, and then the drag and drop to make the dashboard. You can also use R and Python inside of Power BI, which I've also done a lot of, and that works out pretty well. But of course you have to know Python or R. But quite frankly, I think I'd rather learn R and Python than DAX and M. It's a more general skill, right? So anyway, I gotta stop talking.
Thank you. All good things. Love all the languages that are being thrown all over the place. And I'm just going to echo what Tony says. For us, we find that for citizen data scientists, using a tool like Dataiku is helpful, because both as data scientists can come in using R, Python, Julia, etc., all of the languages, and there's a lot of visual recipes that can be done too, which help those citizen data scientists that maybe haven't had language taught be just as efficient as the data scientists too. All right, let's talk a little bit about process here. So I don't know how many of you have seen this before. I think, yes. Some of you may have, some of you may have not. I did not come up with this. I actually looked. This was created in 1996, which seemed like yesterday, but is close to 30 years ago now. This is the standard process for data mining, and it's called CRISP-DM. I'm pointing it out because it's a very iterative. I love looking at data science this way. It starts and ends with business understanding. And that's where the citizen data scientist is the most helpful, is business understanding. But they're also involved with the entire process. So not only do they start with the business understanding and the data understanding, they help with the data prep. They can help with the modeling, the evaluation, the deployment, etc. Could go on and on. So this is the inspiration for my next slide here. This is one of my favorite slides I've ever made. So I know it's busy, but let me talk through it. So this is a similar process, but I kind of laid it out this way. And this is the data science process, all the way from the initial analysis, pipeline creation to getting data in, exploratory analysis, where we get to dig into the data, the more complex stuff, machine learning, and then evaluation and deployment of models. And the colors here is that the citizen data scientist I put in the orange and the other roles I put in this white color, and just to show that the citizen data scientist is a part of this entire process. And the sizes just mean the amount of time that was spent, but lots of orange on here throughout the whole thing. The citizen data scientist lives from infancy all the way until retirement with these things, and they're valuable every single part of the way. So we're going to jump into a little bit of detail about each one of these and what the citizen's data scientist does. As I do that, I'm also going to talk through an example. So we'll walk through the how, and then I'll give a good example. So in our example, we have a business request, and this is to cross-sell more products to existing customers. So you may have seen this before as a market basket analysis, or you may have shopped on Amazon before, and it is suggested to you because you bought, I don't know, pickles, that you might like pickled popcorn or something to that. There's got to be a better example. And so I won't go into the total details here, but it uses existing data on existing customers to understand which products they have in our example, what types of products are normally bought together. So in this example, 3 times there was diapers and milk bought together, or milk and bread bought together. I think the old real example is about beer and diapers, but I probably will butcher it, so I won't go into it. But this is the request that we're going to follow through through the process. So first of all, we start with the initial analysis, and that starts with defining the question. So I have to stop here already. My citizen data scientist's feelings are already saying, are you sure you understand the question? And that's where I have this quote over here. It says, we often move from the problem space to the solution space too quickly. We don't spend enough time engaging with the problem space. And how big is the problem? Who does it affect? What does success look like? How do we operationalize? These are all the types of thinking that we need to embed into the analytics workforce. And a citizen data scientist is the perfect person to challenge that. And so they're heavily involved with this initial analysis. They help right-size the scope, identify the data sources. And we all know that some of the data sources is an Excel on a SharePoint that, you know, we don't want to talk about. And then some data sources are huge. And there's a lot of work on getting access to those data sources, security, et cetera. They'll collaborate with product owners, SMEs, end users. Lots of end user interviews are important in this part. I'm always the one that pushes for more end user interviews before we even start solutioning. And then the deliverables from this phase include user stories and tasks created, and most importantly, define success criteria. So in our example, what are we doing? What are we trying to understand? What does success look like? And for this is a real life example that I've gone through, but the first step was, what is a customer? Because that wasn't well defined. What is a product? It turns out for this particular example, not all products should be considered products because some of them don't make any money, it turns out, for this customer. So they didn't want to consider those. Where do we get all this data from? For them, it was just in a CRM system. I was able to collaborate with the sales team, the marketing, lots of leadership buy-in in order to do a project like this. And that was really important because a lot of times in data science, the data will tell you something that the salesperson doesn't necessarily believe or trust right off the bat. So having leadership help understand that this is the data telling us this, and just because you feel differently, you know, or your experience is different. So we delivered user stories and success criteria, making sure that we had identified at least 10 opportunities and a successful sale in the first 3 months. You may think that that's small, but for this particular customer, that was actually a really big win. They have a pretty long sales cycle. Their customer base was only around 500. Well, it was around 600, but only around 500 that they wanted to consider targeting. So this was big for them. Any questions before I move on to pipeline?
It's me again.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say, one of my favorite topics to teach, let me just back up one click here. So historically, subjective forecasting, which includes sort of, maybe for lack of a better phrase, kind of gut type things, or maybe more survey, what do people just kind of think, what's their opinion about what's going to happen? That was really how forecasting was done for the first 5,000 years humans were around, right? It's only more recently we've had the computational power to be able to do quantitative forecasting in a meaningful way. And really probably even the last 25-ish years has it gotten kind of on the desktops of folks. And it has taken over, as you might guess, probably 80, I think recent estimates say about 85% of modern forecasting is quantitative in nature. But you bring up a common problem that I like to address when I'm teaching, which is how do you convince people who are more old guard or who maybe just graduated from the school, 20 years ago instead of 3 years ago? How do you buy them into some of these processes, right? And there's a really cool technique called combination forecasting, which is basically how all modern forecasting is done. It's also known as ensembling in other contexts. And what's cool about it is you can take somebody's sort of subjective, hey, this is how we've been doing forecasting for a long time, belief structure. You can combine it with your new forecast, and you can create this hybrid. And frequently you can get a superior forecast model that incorporates both this sort of old school subjective, people don't want to let it go security blanket model they've been using for 20 years in the closet with the Excel, right, or whatever, and your new age method that you really want to try and see if it'll float. In fact, I just got done with my graduate students, making them go through an exercise exactly like this process. And so there's lots of things to know out there. I think one of the coolest parts about all this is, and some of you who are just entering this space are gonna, I guarantee, utter this phrase. I didn't even know this stuff was possible. And so this is a small example of what's out there and the opportunities that will just sort of go. Text mining is another great example. I won't digress on that, but anyway, so you had an example that reminded me of a great opportunity to kind of link that flow of old school beliefs with modern technology and getting people, both sides, on board.
And I don't know if you were here for the last meetup, but I watched the recording, and Paul talked a lot about change management at your company.
Mm-hmm. That is a very important piece of the process of trying to keep an eye on, in our environment, the rapid changes that are happening. ProAmpac's a company formed by acquisition, and we've continued to acquire, in my 3 years there, just this year, 3 other companies. And bringing all that into our data and processes is really a struggle of keeping track of changes and adapting to new things.
Yeah, I mean, a huge part about this, we teach this in our program, in our grad programs too, is communication. Like, you have to be able to, I mean, I make jokes about the data sciences in the basement with the stapler, right? I get it. But those people are going to die out in the next 5 years. Okay. 5 years from now, there's so many people entering data science now, you won't be able to be a data scientist with poor communication skills. They won't hire you because you can hire someone else who does have good communication skills. Likewise, people who have no data skills are going to become dinosaurs too, because data is just permeating so many business strategy decisions moving forward. So this is where, again, the citizen data scientists, those with intermediate level skills and data are going to be really essential and core to how we move forward in the business world moving forward. It's already happening. It's just going to gain steam. But anyway, I yield again.
You're selling it for me. I don't have to convince anyone. Become a citizen data scientist.
I'm doing all this for a bacon burger.
So the next part is, once you've taken due diligence in understanding both the success criteria and the problem, we have to get some data from somewhere. And so we'll work closely with infrastructure, data engineers, SMEs, and do a lot of that verification. Make sure that it's the right data, verify it's the right structure, make sure that it looks right. Do we have the right dates? You know, are we missing big gaps? So a lot of the deliverables out of this is just the very basic data readiness for exploratory analysis, and citizen data scientists can be helpful in that. In our example, I was able to verify that we had the correct CRM data, the counts were correct, as many records we were supposed to have in order to get this information. We verified that we had the correct tables. We understood that the products, out of their 80 products, which of the 35 that we actually wanted to evaluate. I worked really closely with the data engineer and a CRM expert that was really close to their CRM system. And lo and behold, we're ready to do some exploratory analysis. So what is exploratory analysis? I'll stop before I read all of this and just say it's being curious about data and wanting to look in, but the goals include assessing the quality, understanding if you need more data in order to do more complex analysis, looking for opportunities for new sources of data. We have lots of examples where we come in and something's not clean enough, and so we need to get the data from somewhere else. Really briefly, I had an example where I was able to work with the business and I said, all of your customers are in Canada, Alberta, and they looked at me and started laughing. And they said, no, that's the first thing in the dropdown is Alberta. And so everyone was saying they were in Alberta. And so everyone's run into this situation before where you say, uh-oh, it turns out we need a new data source. And so finding those spots early will help you out. Identifying outliers, some very strange things, duplicates, things like that. In one case, I had what should have been about 30 options, ended up being 700 different options because people were self-entering and there was lots of, fat fingering and spelling it differently. And so that became an issue right off the bat. Documenting and incorporating those complicated business rules is important. There is always someone in the room that says, well, it was that until 2 Tuesdays ago, and all of a sudden it's this. Or, so we switched systems and that field didn't make sense anymore. So understanding those and documenting those is very much part of this process. We collaborate so closely with the SMEs at this time. I visit them at least once a week. I mean, I show them everything. I'm making visuals and I'm getting feedback as fast as possible to keep things moving. The earlier I catch it, the less chance that we do something later on with it. So, question we have is, what do you suggest on assisting citizen data profiling, bad data identification skills, gaps in data? This is on data profiling. So what do I suggest?
Yeah, maybe I should describe that. It's challenging enough as a data engineer to discover bad data and gaps in data and understanding the data. We are helped by data profiling tools, but those I found that, that's rare that companies have those type of tools, and especially not in the hands of a citizen data scientist. So what do you suggest as far as teaching and any tools or methods, when to profile that data, before analysis?
So I have two thoughts kind of on this. First of all, the best citizen data scientists have this data curiosity where they just have to figure it out. And it's something that I just can't teach. It's just you meet some people and they just want to sniff it out. And it's like they're on the first date and they're getting to know the data and they just find things, and they want to know more about that, or something seems strange and they want to know why that column is called that. And so part of it is just spending time with the data. And the second part, I can't stress this enough, is that a citizen data scientist will never know as much as the SME knows. And getting that tribal knowledge, or lately they call it experienced intuition, is being humble and just being able to say, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm seeing, and constantly showing and not ever you trust but verify. It looks like I said, I showed them a map of where their customers were. I thought that that would be a really simple, thing for everyone to, oh, look, all your customers are in Alberta, moving on, and that stopped us right in our tracks. So it's not a tool to me. It's a curiosity, and it's listening to the SMEs as often as they'll let you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, good points. Thank you.
Oh, and I see someone wrote data quality checklists. Matt, do you have a checklist that you use?
We just have a rough checklist. Sorry, it took me a while to find my unmute. But it's kept on a notepad somewhere, and every time I have a project, I go down through the list. Where are my duplicates? Where are my misspellings and all that kind of stuff? Dates, weights, that kind of thing.
Same. I also have one that I run through. I was just curious if there was one that you all were using. Does anyone else have a checklist that you either mentally or on a napkin or formally do? And I love the comment above about exploratory analysis. If it feels like 80 to 90% of the work, agreed. And according to the previous slide, that's what data scientists spend a lot of their time on.
There's actually kind of a funny reason for that. Once you get your models wired, suppose you've done the work as a data scientist, you know that some sort of bagged, version of an ANN and a random forest gives you the best model or whatever. You got the model figured out. Then it really becomes about making sure the data going into the model is clean. And Virginia, you probably know this about me, but maybe the others don't. And most people who are in my line of work, we're pretty used to working alone, and we're always responsible for our own mistakes. So I think a lot of data scientists end up cleaning because they're compelled to do it. Because if, like someone has noted, if the data isn't cleaned properly, the model's not going to work, or it's going to get garbage out, right? So I know when I'm working with really important projects, maybe with that a lot of money on the line, I will, go right down to the, basically the ERP type level, the raw data, so to speak, and I will clean it myself, usually with a Python script or an R script or something, so that I know that I'm on firm ground, or what I'm sending into the final predictive model is correct. And this is where I think some breakdowns can happen sometimes. If the citizen data scientists aren't in line with maybe what's actually being run into the model, that handoff can be kind of like a baton drop potentially. And that's one place that I would definitely want to pay close attention to. So those, you didn't have a bunch of finger pointing if things went badly, oh, well, they didn't clean the data right. Well, their model's stupid. You have to be able to have those gears have to mesh, you know what I'm saying? And that's sort of mutual oversight. But once you get the models wired, you're okay. And then the data scientists, but if they're constantly having new projects, then they're always trying to find new models, and there's new models being developed from research, academic research all the time. So there's always sorts of new things that they're trying to improve. Natural language processing, of course, is a huge area that's always, every time I look, there's a new algorithm for something, right? And anyway, so mostly I'm trying to point out the handoff between data cleaning and how critically important that is, and making sure that, like someone was mentioning, you can't stress enough how pre-processing steps have to be done with integrity and consistently. And I'd like to demonstrate, for example, how badly things can go if you leave some outliers in. I will show people how regression estimates blow up, or how your KNN models won't work quite as well, or if you forget any of these steps. Multivariate outliers like Mahalanobis would detect versus univariate outliers, which most people are familiar with. Anyway, there's lots to know in this space, but getting that tight is really important. I talk way too much, definitely muting myself now.
I love it. I will keep going with exploratory analysis. This is a vague representation of a checklist, I think, as things that you have to do as part of this, but there's always joining disparate data sets. It's one of the best powers of a lot of the new tools is breaking down those data silos, cleaning data, doing some initial correlation. We usually find that there's at least 4 areas that we need to deep dive into the data. And so I'll go into in this example, but you need to make sure we understand products. We need to make sure we understand customers. There's always some deep dives that we need to go down, and it's worth taking the time. Creating a profile, that's really fun. Not in our example, it's not just saying, okay, this many customers have these products. It's also taking a moment saying, what does our average customer look like? And understanding what the average customer is and what products they use. And then feature creation, which will be useful for our data scientists. The deliverables out of this stage is lots of documentation. It could be scripts, it could be data dictionaries, it could be an Excel of some sort with business rules, just making sure however which tool you're using, whether it's in the code or out of the code, it needs to be documented. There should be some dashboards, there should be visualizations, and then enriched data sets that come out of this. And so as part of our best practice, we try to make sure that there's enriched data sets throughout the process that might be able to be used by other projects and not just for this one. In the example I gave, there was obviously I've never seen a clean data set, so there was some cleaning that needed to be done. It wasn't clear when there were services, when the product start and end date was. Each department was using end dates differently. I'm sure you've all run into this type of cleaning. There were many customers that actually had similar names. So if I had been just using customer name, that wouldn't have worked. I would have made some terrible assumptions about who the customer was. Lots of business feedback on which products should be included, as I mentioned. Some products could only go to very specific customers. So if I started recommending products to a customer I had nothing to do with, it would be painful. We've all heard the horror stories about recommending a product that they probably shouldn't have. I think it was Target and diapers or something. But documentation, we did a lot of joining of tables. We shared them some correlation matrices, trying to understand which products go together. We understood products, customers. We knew the average customer, dashboards that they could start using this information right away. They didn't need to wait until the end of the project. They could get to know their customers immediately. And there were enriched data sets that came along the way. So they hadn't before had such a clean data set that had customer and address. So we were able to provide that to them to use in other areas, and also customer address and product. Now with our new rules, we could keep that and other people could use that too. And then it was time for more complex analysis. And so in this stage, the citizen data scientist collaborates a lot with the data scientist. Like Ryan said, you can't just hand off, drop the baton. You want to hand off nicely, help refine that model, create lots of iterations on that. There's lots of different types of analysis: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive. I can see Ryan chomping at the bit to talk about that, but I know. But this one in particular was descriptive. The deliverable here was an actual model, and I think that's what I put on this slide. Yep. So it was a descriptive analysis. We were able to tell them the probability of purchasing product X based on their current products that they have. I worked closely with the data scientist on this one and delivered to the sales team this, and we love to do things iteratively. So we provide it to one salesperson, and they started making calls, and then they immediately realized that this was a big deal. And even before deployment, they started sharing the information out.
They asked if X was a new product.
Nope, it was not. It was an existing product. Any questions about these two steps? Okay, this is the step that leadership wants to know about all the time. Evaluation. Oh,
there was a question about regression.
Regression.
For regression, yeah. I assume you meant regression testing. Don't let
Ryan.
him unmute. Just answer his question.
I just curious if you were the way you phrased that made it look like maybe you'd used a regression to with like a logit or something, or I'm just curious what method you used.
No,
Or maybe you can't say that. Maybe it's an NDA thing.
No, we just use the market basket analysis a priori. Am I
Okay.
using yep.
Say that
Okay.
again. What was that?
Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah, a priori. That's right.
Yep, it's a market basket analysis. There's a couple different names for it.
It's a form of association analysis and matrix factorization, and fall in kind of the unsupervised learning type realm that are commonly used for those types of things. But
Interesting. Thanks.
yes, what Ryan said. I like to talk it as recommendations based on your current product set. So leadership want to know about when will this be deployed? How will we evaluate it? How will we maintain it? And citizen data scientists is helpful here too. So they can help evaluate the model, work closely with the business, verify once it's deployed, create a maintenance plan and help with that maintenance. A lot of data scientists can get bogged down in maintenance when a citizen data scientist can help with that. Collaborates a lot with the end users. The deliverables are usually reports or dashboards or APIs. And to me, I think the checklist, another checklist we have here is understanding, is the model valuable to the business? Is it adaptive? Is it user-friendly? Is it accurate? And is it ethical? And these are all things that a citizen data scientist can help verify. In our example, we were able to work with the sales to educate the team on what it was. So as we've mentioned, some change management had to happen. There was some hesitancy to sell certain products because they didn't understand why they were associated with each other, even though the data said so. They weren't quite trusting of it at first until they started making the calls. So this was actually the CRM calling the model through an API to score the customer. So understanding how this looked in the CRM system, revisiting the model for feedback as we were learning. And my checklist now is our success metrics. There was way more than 10 suggestions that we received from doing this analysis. And we had a definite one product sale in the first 3 months. There was more, but because of the long sales cycle, it took them a little longer, but we met our success criteria. Any questions about how the citizen data scientist, before I go on, was involved in any of these steps? Okay, if you think that you are a citizen data scientist, you tonight have changed your title already. I can see it in your eyes. There are ways that you can add value today, even without the most perfect infrastructure. You can empower your management and officers to make better decisions in this role. You can challenge the company to adopt best practices and focuses on issues that matter in this role. You can make decisions with quantifiable data-driven evidence, so you can help gather the evidence that makes the big decisions once you have it. Citizen data scientists are great at identifying opportunities, refining, identifying target audiences that maybe you hadn't known before, and right on the front lines of testing new decisions as they come out, using data to help. So thank you. And I have to do a shameless plug at the end here. I am from Excellion Partners, and we are an advanced analytics and data science practice, as I said, right down the road in Neenah. We help organizations build their analytics capabilities with people, processes, and tools. We work with lots of manufacturers companies coast to coast, and manufacturers a lot of times because of the area, but we have other competencies such as logistics. We work in banking, finance, healthcare, etc. So we'd love to talk. And if you want to talk about citizen data scientists, I'm there for it anytime. So thank you.
Thank you so much for presenting. We'll have some still Q&A here. Any particular questions people thought of to directly for, against the presentation? I know I had one. You closed down your slides. I was going to say, if you go back to the one where you were talking in the very beginning about the amount of time data scientists spend on data prep and it being, what, 80% or something like that, it got me wondering about some sort of division of labor in the term or what a data scientist does. If their cleaning isn't really data science, is there opportunities here to start thinking of levels of skill set or role where, I think data scientist and people, come over with Python and R, and I go, I don't want to look at any of that crap. I just want to deal with the database. I'm a technical guy. I get the data out. Maybe I'm going to clean it for a data scientist, right? And so that 80% of the data prep starts to fall to roles that aren't as sciencey. Is that something that has any traction, or is where the future might be going? Or do data scientists need to be involved in the cleaning? Otherwise, they can't really understand the data they're trying to do science on.
So I know I see some hands up. I'm just going to quick interject. I work really closely with data scientists regularly, and we find that having the right tools means that I can take over a lot of that cleaning and really seamlessly hand that off. And so I think that citizen data scientists can continue to whittle down that 80% into a much more manageable, I review and I give suggestions instead of having to do it all. But I see other hands raised.
Yeah, Eric, Matt Erickson said that data cleaning requires coding skills to be efficient. Might be a good point. Anyone else?
Sure. I was just going to say, you had talked about the iterative process. I find that even though you have a handoff of the data, oftentimes once we create the model and we find the results, we find ourselves going back into the exploratory phase and changing the data based on what the model has given us and any new information. So it's not so much of just a handoff of data, but rather working with the exploratory team and the quote unquote data science team, which would be like the hard Python and R coders, and going back and forth. So I don't know if that kind of like answers your question about the levels, but it's much more of a back and forth process than we've cleaned the data and now we code in R. It's like we've cleaned it, we go to R, we go back to cleaning it, we go to R,
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's like the crisp slide you had, right?
Yes. Virginia? I second that. I've seen very few times that we haven't done this circle. I mean, in fact, I don't think there's any that we haven't done this circle. And to Matt's point, I found that even data scientists appreciate the non-coding, like the tools like a Dataiku where there's visual recipes. They don't mind that they're visual, and that as long as they're well documented and we can just keep going back and they can make changes to that same code.
Nice. Thanks. Any other questions people thought of in our Q&A period here, particular to the presentation? Type them in if you don't feel comfortable unmuting, but feel free to unmute. Hey, you're typing. Give them a second. All right. I have lots. Nice.
We have open discussion later too, so maybe some of them can go there.
Sure. Okay, because I'm trying to narrow down questions to the presentation so that we can fold down our recording on this. Let's see, what is the most common challenge you see in the CDS needing to be overcome?
Is CDS Citizen Data Scientist? That's the new lingo.
It would have taken me too long to write it out.
Awesome. So challenge for the CDS. I think that there will always be a disconnect from what the data scientist technology is using and what you're comfortable with. And to, I think actually Ryan's point earlier, in one project, I could have a data scientist that loves R, and I can have a data scientist that loves Python. And I can have another, in the future, I could work with another data scientist that likes Julia. And so being able to keep up that you understand enough, or that you can help all of those data scientists. I like learning new languages, but just keeping that up, or having the right tool where you can all collaborate in the same spot. So a tool like Dataiku or something else. I think that's where you might run into some hurdles, but they're fun hurdles. They're challenging. And so, yeah.
I like that answer. June in the chat, I like her answer to that. Our thought on that too is really a challenge will be prioritizing between their normal day job and their data science, citizen science job. Because I could see that as people become familiar with becoming more of a citizen data scientist when their company understands them to be a business analyst. And where is that dividing line, and what do their leaders understand that to look like?
I think that's a great point. And I'm just going to add, when the word prioritize hit me hard, because we all know that the more questions that you answer, the more questions that come. And if people start knowing that you have answers, you're going to have a rough time stopping the phone from ringing, and you're going to need a leader that helps you prioritize those things too.
Good. Great. Got any other Stump the Chump questions, Tony?
I think it's Stump the Star. Stump the Star.
Oh,
right?
there you go. There you go.
I can say something real quick about that. I think what's going to happen is most data scientists, at least the ones I know, are multilingual. I mean, you have to be kind of. I mean, you can't just be only an R person, really, if you really want to be useful. And you got to know Python, you got to know kind of, because different clients are going to have different platforms, and you have to be able to kind of crosswalk yourself. And I think most people are sort of recognizing that. And the truth is, once you kind of learn a couple of these languages, it's not really that bad to learn another one. I mean, I don't know. It does the first like command prompt line is, that's tough. I admit it. I mean, for me, it was 25 years ago, and it was Fortran 77. So I'm dating myself, but anybody who knows Fortran 77 is probably groaning right now and saying, that poor man. You have no idea how miserable that was compared to what modern programming languages are. But anyway, I digress there. But I do think there's, kind of this, let's just, be prepared for there to be a lot of languages floating around and a lot of software products out there. I think that's, a lot of them are starting to try to nest each other. Like you can do R, and you can do R packages instead of Julia. You can do Power BI houses R and Python, and so does, I think, Tableau houses R. So there's ways that a lot of these products are already kind of, I think Dataiku also allows you to use R and Python inside of them, if I remember right. I kind of get crossed up in all the products that are out there, but so there's a lot of integration anyway. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. I do think, as someone else said, if you really want to kind of get to that next level, you're going to have to wade yourself through one of those programming languages at some point, whether it's DAX or M if you're a Power BI house, or if it's R or Python. I mean, those would be the two most logical, I think, just because they so dominate the space. And again, it's a complementary skill. They'll work with other products too, like Dataiku or Power BI and so on. So it's a good investment if you want to be a citizen data scientist moving into that space. We force our students through R. We accommodate Python to anybody who wants, but we have to try to get them over that first hump and that first sort of experience. And it's the most intimidating part of the process, I'll tell you for sure. Students are more intimidated about learning a programming language than any other part of what we've encountered in our education program. So that's usually the big hurdle. But once they get there, they start seeing some amazing things. Like, I had no idea in 20 lines of code I could, mine 600,000 customer reviews for product improvement ideas, right? It's like, blows their mind. Okay, so I'll quiet down again.
Maddie makes a good point in the chat that the languages also have different specialities. You can't do everything in a single language. Python doesn't have substantial enough packages for forecasting, so you need to use R. We're a long way from the days where there was one language, C, and you had to use it to do everything. That's my world back in the day.
So, Paul, I actually had a question. I know that you guys there's a lot of BI people, right, on this in this discussion today. And, I think that there's this interesting aspect to what's happening in the industry right now. Like, because going back to that cleaning question, there's still cleaning that needs to happen, even if on an analysis, even if like your data warehouse is spit polished clean, right? Like that still has to happen. And so like going back to that data engineer comment, the data engineer needs to clean it. I think it depends for what, is it for a specific analysis that the data engineer and offloading those tasks, or if that's part of like the cleaning is happening as part of like the data warehousing effort. So I think it's a unique thing that we're witnessing inside of the data culture and data world right now, is that analysis is happening post all those steps of analysis still have to happen even post a clean data set.
Nice, thanks. All right. This was good questions at the end of the Q&A. I will say that's the end of the official questions for the presentation. And Nicole will stop the recording now, but we're going to move into the open Q&A networking. If you're sticking around,